So, in the quiet village of Southwater, a local community building has found itself at the center of a pretty major storm. What began as a seemingly straightforward lease for a place called Easteds Barn has, well, it's spiraled into a serious debate about what happens to our public assets and who really benefits when they're sold off. Let's dig in and break it all down.
You know, every controversy has a beginning. And for Easteds Barn, it wasn't some big for sale sign out front. No, it was a much quieter deal, one that started a ticking clock on a really valued community property.
So here it is. This is Easteds Barn in Southwater. Right now, it's home to the Little Barn Owls Nursery, which, is a super important service for local families. But this isn't just any old building. It was once officially recognized as an asset of community value.
So what on earth does being an asset of community value actually mean? Well, think of it like a legal shield. It's a special protection designed to keep important local spots, buildings, land, in community use, making sure they're there to benefit everybody, not just a private owner.
And this is right where that clock starts ticking. Back in March 2019, the parish council signed a lease, but it had this really unusual clause tucked inside, a 7-year option for the tenant to just buy the building, outright. I mean, this puts the whole future of this community asset completely up in the air, with that deadline getting closer and closer in 2026.
Now, if you're going to sell a community asset, one that brings in money for the community every single year, you'd think there would be a crystal clear plan for what to do with the proceeds, right? You would think so.
Yeah, let's be really clear about what's on the line here. If this barn is sold, the parish loses a guaranteed income of over £27,000 every single year. That's real money that could be going right back into community projects.
So you'd think they'd have a plan, right? Well, get this. Nearly 6 years after the sale option was signed, the council's own long-term business plan admits there is no plan for the money. The official line for what happens to the proceeds is simply TBC, to be confirmed. And what makes this no plan thing even crazier is when you look at what the community is crying out for. The council's own infrastructure delivery plan. I mean, this is their own document outlining local priorities. It lists urgent needs like a care home, a secondary school, more allotments, a new skate park, and better youth services.
And here's the real kicker. The plan talks all about how to fund these projects, through developer contributions and things like that. But guess what's missing? You got it. There is not a single word about using the hundreds of thousands of pounds from the sale of Easteds Barn to fund any of these vital community projects. But the story doesn't end there. Oh no, there's another layer to this. It turns out there's been an active effort to remove legal protections on the property. And why would you do that? Well, it makes it a lot more valuable to a private owner. So in an attempt to protect the open space right next to the barn, residents applied to have it designated as a village green. This is a really powerful legal tool that basically locks in land for community recreation pretty much forever.
And the community really got behind this. I mean, look at that number. 92 separate evidence forms were submitted, all testifying to decades of public use. That's a massive show of support.
So, with all that overwhelming community effort, how many objections do you think were filed to try and block it? Just one. And you're probably not going to believe who that one objector was. It was the landowner itself. Southwater Parish Council, the very organization that's supposed to represent the will of those 92 residents who submitted all that evidence. Now, the council tried to get it thrown out on a technicality. They argued that because they owned the land, any public use was technically with their permission, so the application should fail. But an independent evaluation looked at everything and basically said, nope, the community's application was solid, it met all the legal tests, and the land should be protected.
Okay, so let's step back for a second. When you put all of this together, the weird buy now option, the tangled connections, the missing plan, and the effort to remove protections, what does it all add up to?
A good way to think about what seems to be happening here is with an analogy. It really looks like the parish council isn't acting like a guardian of a public asset, but more like a staging agent, getting the property ready for its own tenant. I mean, just think about it. First, they offer this buy now option years in advance. Then, they admit they have no idea what to do with the money. On top of that, they are the only ones actively trying to get rid of these legal protections, kind of like scrubbing the windows to make the place look better for a buyer.
So all of this leads to one really big, unavoidable question for the people of Southwater. Is the council's handling of Easteds Barn really about serving the long-term public interest,
Or is it about greasing the wheels for a public asset to be turned into a private profit? That's the question the community is now trying to answer.
Well, here's the unavoidable truth. Losing a guaranteed income of almost £30,000 a year with no plan to replace it creates a hole in the budget. And when there's a hole in a council's budget, it's pretty much always the local residents who are asked to fill it with higher taxes.
And that leaves us with one last huge question. When you see a public asset being prepped for a private sale by the very people who are supposed to be protecting it, you just have to ask, who really stands to gain the most from this deal, and who is being set up to ultimately pay the price?